If you're getting to the endgame of Last Epoch and you're curious about monoliths, empowered monoliths, and corruption, then this video is for you. Let's jump in. So I'm not going to get too into the very basics of the monolith system here, but if you've been playing through, you've probably been progressing through the various monoliths. The key thing here is to get empowered monoliths unlocked, which are like the harder difficulty monoliths. You have to have completed these 3 monoliths at the end of the tree of monoliths, if you will. The Spirits of Fire, the Age of Winter, and the Last Ruin. Once you've done that, you can go and enter into the empowered monolith mode by going to any monolith. You can go back to anyone and then just run up here and enter it, and you'll get prompted like this, and you kind of select the area level that you'd like. So empowereds are always level 100. So if we choose these, we'll see we kind of get the same monolith tree we're used to seeing on our first run through of a given monolith, but there's some notable changes here. The empowered monoliths are always level 100. There's this corruption modifier here. It starts at 100, and what corruption does is it increases the health and damage of enemies. You can see that's what this enemy modifiers thing here, but it also increases your XP, and it increases the item rarity. So if you're looking for like legendaries with legendary potential, that really high-end gear, as you push up into higher corruption, your drop rate for those items will increase. There's a couple of ways you can kind of get into these higher levels of corruption if you're pushing through into the end game and you feel like you're doing pretty well. The main one are through these echoes right here. They look like this. These are the shades of orobyss. They'll increase the corruption when you complete them. So like if I mouse over this one, you'll see it gives us +4 corruption in the lower right there. And it'll also give us timeline stability like all these other nodes will. But just like timeline stability, the further out that a given shade is, the more corruption it's going to give you. So just like stability, the further away you kind of get from the starting hub, the more stability these nodes will give you, and the more corruption the shades will give you when you finally defeat them. Once you've gone through and you've completed one of these echoes of a world, these shades, this node will then be unlocked. It's the Sanctuary of Atera. Essentially what that does is it'll bring the corruption back down for a given monolith, because each of these monoliths is its own kind of separate corruption track. And there's one other mechanism, is that you'll note that we still have this like stability system up here happening. We still have these side quest echoes like you have on your first time through, but the little side quests don't really do anything for you on the empowered monoliths. The boss fight still will. When you complete the boss fight, you'll gain a Gaze of Orobyss, and you can do this multiple times. And then eventually, if you've accumulated Gazes of Orobyss, when you finally do come here and complete a shade, it'll give you bonus corruption when you go through it. It'll show up in this window here in the lower right. It'll be like +4 corruption and plus, 10 bonus corruption if you have a couple Gazes. So the opening strategy a lot of people do is they'll just kind of go out and they'll fill in their web here, getting their stability built up, and they'll beat the boss a couple times, get a couple of Gazes, and then go to one of these shades, complete it, and that'll reset their timeline, rinse and repeat, until you kind of get up to a corruption level that you feel comfortable with. Where most people are grinding is like around that 300 mark. I think much above that, even optimized builds struggle. There's probably some exceptions to this rule where like really good builds can burn through higher levels, but I think it's kind of one of those diminishing returns things where even really good builds will get slowed down at super high corruption levels, so it might not be worth your time all the time. A couple other notes: if you're struggling quite a bit, there is some kind of metagaming you can do here. So maybe on your first time through, you kind of were able to burn through these pretty quick, especially if you were running like a super strong build. Something to note for these boss fights, if you're struggling, or before you go in and fight a shade, most echo modifiers, so like the modifiers that you build up as you go through echoes, those will actually apply to boss fights. You might not have noticed this on your first run through, but like, let's say we did this one as an example. My camera's kind of in the way, but it's an enemy modifier. High health enemies take 25% less damage, and it lasts for 2 echoes. If you do this and then you go into the boss fight or you go into a shade, that modifier is going to apply to the boss as well. So keep an eye on your modifiers here, and if you're struggling to get through these, especially on the bosses, what you can do is ensure that the last few echoes you do are not very impactful modifiers, and then go into the boss fight. And those can make it significantly easier and make sure you don't, lose those boss fights and don't struggle against them too much. And also just in general, as you're progressing, like keep an eye on those modifiers. Some of them don't really impact you too much, but some of them will really make some fights difficult, like increase damage by 50%, making enemies deadly, marked for death. Some of those things can be way more impactful than like, chance to slow and stuff like that. So that's one thing to keep in mind. This is a rather large skill bump from the non-empowered monoliths, because the empowered monoliths are all the way up at level 100, and you're bringing in the 60% modifiers that are making everything do more damage and have more health, so keep that in mind. And then as you increase your corruption, you can see how it's impacting enemy damage and enemy health. And it doesn't take too long before you're doubling those, and again, it can ramp up, so don't get discouraged. Keep an eye on the modifiers, kind of try to play tactically, and just keep iterating on your build as always. And don't be afraid to pop out and start a new monolith or something if you're struggling a lot. That's one other thing we should mention, is there is a bit of a catch-up mechanic here. As I said before, each monolith has its own corruption tracker, similar to the stability tracker. You can kind of think of each of these as an independent thing. So if we go back out, and we go to a different one, and we look at this one is going to be at 100 corruption for me because I haven't done it at all yet. But if you have a monolith that is at much higher corruption, so you've got one that's at like 300 or something, the others, you'll gain bonus corruption more quickly as you level up that monolith. So if you're trying to get everything leveled up and you're having a pretty easy time, what you can do is optimize one monolith, like get that thing really high if you're doing well, and then go and catch all the others up, and it should save you some time, especially if you're doing well. But again, if you don't get there right away, don't get psyched out. This game can be kind of challenging at times. Yeah, I think that pretty much wraps it up. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment, hop in the Discord, or try to catch me live on Twitch. I'll have links to both of those in the description. As always, thank you for watching. I'll catch you guys next time.